Please, trust me.
At the start of the film, we see a man named Paul desperately fleeing through the chaos that seems to signal the end of civilization, with sirens blaring and explosions resounding in the background. Following his escape, we see Paul at a secluded spot some distance away from the city, cradling his 2 infant boys and reassuring them that they will be safe. 15 years later, Paul and his twin sons, Joseph and Thomas, reside in a remote farmhouse. Paul is preparing them for an unspecified threat, and each night, they diligently work to ensure their house is completely safe and secure. After dinner, while Paul watches his sons play chess, they suddenly notice their dog scratching the floor, alerting them to something amiss. Thomas quickly goes downstairs to investigate when suddenly, loud banging on the door startles him. Paul springs into action, attempting to prevent whoever or whatever is outside from breaking down the door, with Thomas assisting him. Once the banging ceases, they return upstairs where Joseph shares his observations from while they were downstairs. He explains that the creature shook the door 3 times. The first shake lasted 10 seconds and seemed to be a test. The second lasted 20 seconds and appeared to be a genuine attempt to break through. And the final shake was just once, possibly out of frustration. The next day, Paul approaches, looking at a nearby car, and asks Joseph if he would like to show him what he has been working on. Joseph explains that he can't get it to start, but once it does, he believes it will be a significant help with their work around the farm. Paul then asks if that's why he built it, to which Joseph responds that he doesn't want to hide from them anymore. Paul checks the car and manages to start it, and when Joseph asks what he did, Paul explains that he just swapped the relays. Following their successful start of the car, Paul takes Joseph outside and teaches him to drive. Upon their return home, Paul informs Joseph that he needs him and his brother to go down to the river to salvage materials because the window covers need reinforcement. He also mentions that Joseph can go to the rose farm tomorrow. During their journey to the river, Thomas expresses frustration to Joseph, blaming him for feeling stuck. Joseph retorts, stating that he is free to go wherever he wants because he doesn't need his help. Thomas then asks Joseph to stop the car, and as he exits, he informs Joseph that he'll meet him at the same spot before sunset so they can return home together. Thomas then reaches the rose farm, and here we learn that Thomas secretly has a crush on Charlotte, Mr. and Mrs. Rose's daughter. On the other hand, while collecting supplies from an old wrecked ship, Joseph senses something strange. Suddenly, he is startled by a cockroach, and soon after, numerous cockroaches begin to fly and swarm around him, enveloping him in a disturbing frenzy. As sunset approaches, Paul grows increasingly concerned upon realizing his children have not yet returned home. Meanwhile, Joseph manages to exit the ship, only to find his car refusing to start. But after numerous attempts, he eventually gets the car running. Thomas, on the other hand, races recklessly to make it home on time, but he stumbles and falls into a crevice. When Joseph arrives home, he informs Paul about Thomas's plan to visit the rose farm and his promise to return before sunset. But he hasn't shown up. Paul tells him that he will be back with his brother in the morning, and in the meantime, he tasks Joseph with securing the house. Meanwhile, Thomas regains consciousness and finds himself in a cave, and as he looks around, he encounters a creature lurking in the dark. On the other hand, Joseph senses a presence outside the house, adding to the tension of the situation. Here, Thomas takes out a knife for his safety, and as he attempts to flee, the creature attacks him. However, just in time, Paul arrives and intervenes, pulling the creature off and ultimately killing it. Afterward, Paul enters the cave and reaches Thomas, who explains that he slipped while running. Paul suggests they stay put until dawn and asks Thomas to help him close the entrance. Later, while Joseph is sleeping, a creature sneaks into the house, and it extends its nail to confirm he is in deep sleep. It then opens the door, and as it approaches Joseph, he quickly reacts and traps it in a cage. Meanwhile, Paul and Thomas realize that the creatures are emerging from underneath them, trapping them in the cave. Paul decides to set up an explosive and instructs Thomas to get back against the wall for safety. However, during the explosion, Paul gets injured. The next morning, Joseph finds them and brings them back home using his car. However, they are unsure of what to do with their unconscious father. After a while, Joseph tells Thomas that he caught one of them last night by using himself as bait. Thomas tries to take out the cover, but Joseph stops him, saying the light hurts it. Joseph then recounts that the creatures took only 8 minutes to enter the house the previous night, and there were only 2 of them. He suggests that something is not right and that they are becoming smarter. Thomas adds that Mr. and Mrs. Rose mentioned that the creatures hardly ever go to the Rose farm, and admits that he was the one who killed the creatures in the cave and believes he could do the same to the one currently in the cage. They both venture outside, and as soon as the cage door is opened, the creature swiftly emerges and retreats to a corner of the room. Now, before they can take any action, Rocco arrives, causing the creature to attempt to flee. However, Joseph acts swiftly, capturing the creature, while Thomas swiftly decapitates it with an axe. Joseph informs Thomas that he was planning to study and learn from the creature, but Thomas inquires if he thinks they can eat it. Later, while Joseph performs a necropsy on the creature, it becomes evident that he was already researching these creatures, and during this examination, he notices mud stuck in the creature's nails, sparking his curiosity further. Later, on Thomas's suggestion, they transport their father to the Rose farm, where Thomas explains the dire situation to Mr. and Mrs. Rose. However, Mrs. Rose regretfully informs them that they don't have any spare medicine and can't accommodate someone so severely injured. Charlotte offers their spare room, but Mrs. Rose insists that only Thomas can stay. Hearing this, Joseph silently begins to leave, and when Thomas approaches him, Joseph expresses his indifference, stating that he doesn't take any responsibility and will do as he pleases, regardless of the consequences. He bluntly remarks that their father is going to die, which enrages Thomas, who pushes Joseph down and attempts to strangle him. However, he stops himself and walks away from Joseph. Joseph returns home with Paul and becomes concerned upon noticing the dug-up ground outside their house. He quickly places Paul inside a room and then rushes to the barn to check if the creatures have created a tunnel to enter their house. Meanwhile, Thomas confides in Charlotte, expressing his inability to stay. He asks her if she has any medicine. Unbeknownst to them, one of the workers named Hobbs overhears their conversation. Charlotte gives him the medicine, and Thomas assures her that he will return. As Thomas sets off to return home, Hobbs intercepts him at gunpoint. Thomas tries to explain that he doesn't have time and that Charlotte has given him the medicine, but Hobbs refuses to listen. Meanwhile, Joseph discovers a hidden hole forming under a carpet in the kitchen, suggesting a potential entry point for the creatures. At the Rose farm, just as Thomas is about to be shot for stealing the medicine, Hobbs suddenly falls into a hole in the ground, and before anyone can understand anything, a creature emerges from the hole. Hearing the commotion, Mr. Rose wakes up, intending to investigate, but he is swiftly attacked by the creature, which ultimately results in the deaths of Mr. and Mrs. Rose. Meanwhile, the creatures begin their onslaught in the barn, targeting the workers and killing them one by one. As one of the creatures advances toward Thomas, Charlotte takes action, shooting and killing it to protect Thomas. Now, as they emerge from the barn, Charlotte informs Thomas that her parents are gone, indicating that they need to leave immediately. They then reach Thomas's house, where Paul also regains consciousness. Joseph informs him that the creatures dug under the house and asks him what they should do, to which Paul tells them to fight. The 3 of them then rush to the barn to collect some supplies to fight the creatures, and Joseph emphasizes the need to move the freezer inside for their plan. After gathering all the necessary items, they return inside the house, and Joseph requests 10 minutes to prepare. As Joseph makes his preparations, Thomas and Charlotte begin boarding up the windows with planks. However, Thomas soon realizes that the creatures are attempting to enter the house. Both of them hide outside the window, waiting for the creatures to emerge. As soon as a creature exits through the window, Thomas launches an attack, but the creature proves to be too strong initially. However, Thomas ultimately manages to kill it, and Charlotte shoots and kills another. They reunite with Joseph, who reveals his plan to lure the creatures into the house. And while they are moving the freezer to Paul's room, Paul emerges from the room. He takes the gun from Charlotte and shoots the floor, weakening it. As Thomas and Joseph carry the freezer into the room, Joseph informs Paul that he has set a trap and they are running out of time. As the creatures advance towards Paul, they fall through the weakened floor, but one of them manages to reach Paul. Thomas and Joseph immediately come out to help their dad, and witnessing his sons fighting to protect him, Paul sees that his 15 years of training have paid off, and in a moment of realization and determination, he decides to sacrifice himself to save his children. As Paul moves forward, memories of precious moments with his sons flood his mind, and meanwhile, the trio takes refuge inside the freezer. As the creatures emerge, a massive explosion occurs, resulting in Paul's demise along with many of the creatures. However, due to being inside the freezer, the 3 children survive the explosion. After emerging from the freezer, they discover that some of the creatures are still alive. In a panic, they rush to their car and speed away from the area. However, the creatures give chase, pursuing them relentlessly. Fortunately, after some time, the remaining creatures also succumb and perish, allowing them to escape to safety. The next morning, Thomas, Joseph, and Charlotte pay tribute to their parents. Afterward, they set out in search of a new farmhouse, accompanied by their loyal dog, which they had kept safely locked in the barn. Thanks for facing the frights with us. If you survived this video, drop a like, summon that subscribe button, and brace yourself for more horror. Until next time, stay spooked.